I think one of the hardest things that we ever face on the spiritual journey is dealing with and navigating with people that perhaps aren't awakened yet. Perhaps they have yet to come and experience the joy and bliss of the present moment, of awareness, of consciousness, of their true self. You know, not to judge anyone, right? Because that's certainly not the point of the spiritual journey to see yourself as different from others. Ultimately, in the words of Ramana Maharshi, there are no others. We are all one. But certainly on the surface, there can be some differences that appear. Someone may have spent a little bit more time awakening themselves than others. And oftentimes, these two groups of people will kind of interact with each other more frequently than, say, meeting each other randomly at the grocery store or at the mall or at the library, etc. Sometimes these interactions can be daily experiences, like dealing with a family member, a friend, a coworker, an employee. When these moments do occur, how do we respond? How do we navigate the situation? In this video, we will explore what it's like to actually deal with people who are unawakened and see if we can come up with some solutions of how we can address this very sensitive topic. Because inevitably, we all will come across this, if not today, then at some point in the future. And when we do come across it, sometimes it might feel like we're actually taking steps backward on our spiritual journey. We might try to practice patience and peace and loving kindness and generosity. But when push comes to shove and people are pushing our buttons, they're testing us to our very limits, sometimes we may crack. Sometimes we may revert back to our old behavior. Sometimes we may just operate unconsciously. This is a subject that has been on my mind a lot lately. I know I've interacted with a couple of you in the comments on some of my other videos, and I just felt like it was probably the right time to spend some time focusing on this particular topic, because I've certainly encountered it before. Luckily, I don't really experience it much today, but that might change, and there may be instances where in the future I might be interacting with someone who, let's just say, is perhaps a little bit more challenging. I think one of the first things we should be aware of is that everyone has their own starting point, right? This is something that I often tell people, is that you can never really judge someone because you never know when their starting point will be. You never know when that sort of spark of inspiration or that spark of awakening begins to take hold within them. All you can do is show up and be the best version of yourself. All you can do is to be an example for others, right? If you're dealing with someone that is always angry and bitter and foul-mouthed and saying bad things all the time, well, if you respond in the same manner, then you're not really showing that person anything different, right? In fact, you're gonna, anger them even more and validate their sort of behavior towards you and towards others. But if you begin to show them kindness, understanding, not always responding with words, just responding with a peaceful and loving embrace, giving them space to sort of vent out and communicate to you, then they'll start to see that, for whatever I'm throwing out there, this person's not responding. And why is that? Now, sometimes initially that might anger them, right? That might provoke them to get you even more angered and incited and playing the same game that they are. But after a while, if you continue responding with calmness and with compassion, they'll start to see, why is this person so at peace? Why, when I'm attacking their character, why, when I'm attacking and abusing them, perhaps not only just mentally, but physically, verbally, etc., why are they still having this calm and gentle aura? And this is when their anger all of a sudden starts to shift to curiosity. Curiosity, but also indirectly a sense of peace. Because we, through our actions and through our words, affect the vibrations of everyone else around us. We affect the vibrations of the plants. We affect the vibrations of our pets. We affect the vibrations of others. In fact, you can almost see it sometimes. You can feel it sometimes when you're in a room and someone walks in. Depending on how their personality is or depending on how they carry themselves, they can change the entire vibe of that room. And the same is true when we are on the spiritual path as well. The more we're able to practice these qualities, the more we'll sort of naturally affect and have those qualities rub off on other people. Now, this is not to say that we are the world's teachers or that we need to sit up on our pedestal or sit up on our, you know, go out there and try to evangelize and tell people, this is how you should live, this is what you should do, right? Everyone will come to their own conclusion. If asked, you can certainly share and provide, but, the purpose of this is not to educate, right? Because sometimes, actually, a lot of times, people will see that as you looking down upon them. And that's one of the last things that anyone wants, right? Is to feel like they're inferior, to feel like they're not an equal, not worthy, not loved, right? This is where it all kind of comes down to. When you understand why unawakened people act the way you do, you can start to respond with more compassion. And that actually, interestingly enough, does more than any other thing you can do, right? So when someone comes to you and they're just angry and they're venting, your ego might think that you're the one being attacked and that you need to be defensive and that you need to respond. But chances are, if you can just give that person an opportunity to speak and to be heard and to be accepted, well, you've done more for that person than any other thing that you could have ever done before, right? So it's understanding the other person's situation, because you, as the person who has awakened, or as the person who is on this journey to awaken, you are coming from a higher level of understanding at this moment than the other person. And therefore, the onus and the responsibility lies with you. It doesn't lie with the unawakened person, it lies with the awakened person, right? If you are in 12th grade, for example, and a first grader wants to pick a fight with you, well, you don't indulge in that fight with the first grader. You have to be patient. You have to tell the first grader, we shouldn't fight. It's not good. You're the more mature person. And the same is true in our spiritual interactions with others as well. You are the more spiritually mature person. And therefore, you have a responsibility and a duty to that person in that exchange. Now, of course, we're all human, right? That doesn't mean that just because you've perhaps meditated more or read more or have spent more time with yourself and with God, that all of a sudden you can now just be this punching bag. No, we all have emotions. We all have feelings. We all want to be loved and heard. And by no means is what I'm suggesting for you to just, kind of lie there and let people step all over you. But you do have a much greater degree of understanding. And it's up to us to really use that understanding, right? I always kind of think this to myself: spirituality is useless if it's not actually done with action. Spirituality is not meant to, even though it's a very individual journey, it's not meant to be an individual purpose. The purpose has to extend to society. I read a lot of quotes, beautiful quotes, many of which talk about, if you really want to change the world, change yourself. And if we think about this on a very deep level, you can see how true this really is. Yes, you can help people with your time. You can help them with your money. You can help them with your words. You can help them with your impact. But if you really spend the time to really grow and awaken as a human being, you already, without any sort of, explicit action on your own, help the world at large. It's kind of like a ripple effect, right? One ripple creates another chain of ripples, creates another chain of ripples. And in this way, the entire collective psyche, the entire collective consciousness begins to awaken. And to use the words of Eckhart Tolle, begins to flower, it begins to bloom. So when you think about this, your interactions with unconscious and unawakened people will be plentiful. And often they'll actually be tests on the spiritual journey, right? So, it reminds me of this story. I can't remember exactly where I stumbled across it, but it was this young man who had recently gotten into spirituality, and he was trying to meditate more and really get calm. And apparently he had a history of being angry all that time, and so he was really trying to kind of cultivate this sense of inner stillness and inner peace. And for a while he had been successful, but he also had a young child, and this young child was always kind of, she was a daddy's girl, and she was always interested in being with her father, even pre-transformation, post-transformation. And so there's this one story one time where, he kind of locks himself up in a room, and he's trying to meditate, and he's trying to get into the zone. And his little girl is knocking on the door, "Daddy, Daddy, come, let's play." And at first he tries to ignore it. At first he tries to go even deeper, to kind of seclude himself even further and pretend that there's no noise, pretend that there's no interference. But the daughter keeps persisting. And she says, "Daddy and Daddy." And finally, the young man just gets up and he starts yelling, "What do you want with me? Can't you see that I'm meditating? Can't you see that I'm trying to achieve inner peace?" And of course, the irony of the story is that by trying so hard to achieve inner peace, he was doing the thing that actually moved him away from inner peace. In that moment, inner peace was not going to be found by meditating and ignoring his daughter. In that moment, inner peace was going to be found by opening that door and embracing his daughter and playing with his daughter and just being present with his daughter. So this is an example, of course, between an adult and a child, but often, there's going to be many examples where we deal with adults. And of course, adults, as we know, given that we are adults ourselves, come with a lot of baggage, come with a lot of history, come with a lot of egoic patterns and mental tendencies and predispositions that sometimes make it really challenging. Right? Imagine that you're living with a roommate and they're the total opposite of you. You like things clean, organized, proper, and they're messy, sloppy, unorganized. And that affects you, right? Your room, your environment affects you, right? And it's understandable if you want to keep it a certain way, if it, helps you enter into a specific state and you want to maintain that state, right? And so how do you deal with that situation? Right? Especially if that person is obstinate and doesn't want to change their habits, you might not want to change your habits, right? So there's inevitably going to be a sense of friction. And it doesn't matter how spiritually developed you believe you are, that will be a moment to test you. And it's a matter of just being able to, at the same time, get your point across, but at the same time, making sure you're hearing the other person. Making sure that you're not responding with haste, making sure that you're listening, active listening. When I was a couple of years ago, I was really interested in life coaching, and I signed up for a program, and it was actually a very robust 6-month program. I got the certification, and initially that's where I thought I wanted to go, right? Doing life coaching sessions. I eventually, of course, kind of shifted more towards creating these YouTube videos. But at that time, when I was in the course and when I was, doing coaching sessions with my peers, they really taught us the importance of deep listening. And I know we kind of hear it in school and work and stuff like that, but deep listening, if we really kind of, not to use the pun, but if we really go to the core of it or to the deeper parts of it, we'll really see what it actually means to listen to someone deeply. Deep listening is not just, nodding your head and saying yes and, waiting for the next moment, just trying to be patient as much as possible so that you can respond as soon as that other person becomes quiet. Deep listening is listening to a person as if there is no division between you and them, as if there is not even a sense of you anymore, as if there is not even an agenda that you have or a response that you have. And I know at first that might sound a little bit self-deprecating. That might sound, you might ask, Najim, but you said that we shouldn't be like a rug for everyone to step over. And this is true, but this all goes back to kind of the notion, and I've done a couple of videos on this notion of just becoming nothing, becoming empty, going with the flow, surrendering. Because only, as Rumi said, only when you become nothing does God make you everything. Right? If you have an ego, if you have an identity, if you have a story, and you're so tightly clung to all of these things, well, then you won't find inner peace. You'll be like the dad that is so fixated on meditating and getting that 1 hour a day of meditation undisturbed that you'll actually, miss the forest for the trees. You'll actually become further away from the inner peace that you are actually seeking. So it's a matter of understanding that, in this moment, I need to listen to this person as if I have no agenda at all, as if I have no response at all. And of course, in order to do this, you need to have a level of self awareness, a level of introspection, a level of inner stillness. And this can't happen all of a sudden when you start striking up a conversation with others. This happens through your own self work, through the time and effort that you take out to really do the inner observation and to work on yourself. In fact, one of the videos that I'm going to be doing later is kind of on this inner exploration, exploring some of the shadows within us, or shadow work as it's sometimes commonly known. But to just kind of bring it back to this idea is that we're always going to face challenges. We're always going to butt heads with others, but it's our responsibility, it's our duty, and it's for our benefit, right? It's not like this is just helping others and not helping ourselves. If you stoop to the same level of others that are not as awakened, then guess what? You actually regress on your journey. You don't progress, right? And I don't want to kind of paint a pessimistic or a negative outlook that, you can actually go backwards on your spiritual journey. I'm always, glass half full, optimistic, positive, but there are some instances where people, they might get drawn into it, but they're not deep enough into kind of the spiritual world to push through those challenges, to push through those tests. Because guess what? Those people that are unawakened, that you find yourself quick to judging or quick to distinguishing, those people are there to test you, right? In fact, there's some stories actually where some wise mystics, they say, you know what, my greatest teacher is the one that knows nothing, the one that is ignorant, because they will challenge me. The one who is smart, the one who is intellectual, the one who is wise and has already developed, well, they're not challenging me in any way. They might open a new sort of window of understanding, but it's through the ignorant, it's through the unawakened, it's through the unconscious that I'm actually challenged as a person. It's no longer theoretical. It's all practical. It's all experiential. And so I know I've talked about this subject at a great length. There's obviously so much more that we can discuss and explore further. And if you have, any sort of experiences that you'd like to share, or just, any sort of comments about the video in general, I do invite you to please drop them in the comments below. As I've not only dealt with myself personally, but speaking with others who are on a similar path, this is a challenge that will always continue as long as you are with humans, and we certainly always are, or the vast majority of us. There's always going to be kind of those moments of friction, dealing with people that can challenge us in many ways. But as long as we can, remain calm, treat them with compassion, don't see them as different than us, then we can build a bridge. We can build a bridge and we can provide a model. Now, that's not to say that, by being calm and being gentle and being compassionate, that all of a sudden the next day they're going to be the same way. I always say, the seeds you plant today, you might not reap the fruit till next year, right? If you go in my backyard right now, there's trees in our garden where, we've planted 3, 4 years ago, and they're now just starting to bear fruit. They're now just starting to, whether it's our avocado tree or peaches, etc. These are trees that we planted a few years ago, but now we're actually starting to enjoy them. And the same is true with your interactions with others. Don't give up. Don't be impatient. Don't lose hope. Even the person who has been the furthest away from God can all of a sudden become the closest to God. And if you look at various religions and spiritual traditions, you'll see countless examples of this. I've heard, during my time studying a lot of Islamic history, there was times when fierce opponents of the Prophet Muhammad all of a sudden became some of his greatest followers. We see this in Christianity as well, right? With St. Paul, one of the fervent opposition leaders of Christianity, all of a sudden becomes one of its greatest proponents. And Buddha, for example, there's the story that I always mention, sprinkle on in some of my videos about the kind of the forest ambusher and murderer who would murder everyone that crossed his path. And he tried to intimidate Buddha, and Buddha just simply responded with peace and love. And he eventually became one of Buddha's greatest followers and disciples. So there's countless examples of how people that you would have never in a million years imagined awakening and walking the spiritual path, all of a sudden doing so. And of course, I say all of a sudden, sort of half-heartedly, because it's not all of a sudden, right? It's step by step, increment by increment. As they say, drop by drop makes the river. So you can be one of those drops. Or if you deal with that person often, you can be many of those drops. You can, instead of providing a drop, you can provide a bucket. And each day you can provide a bucket to that person. And gradually the river will start to form, and then it will start to flow itself. So never underestimate the impact you can have, but also remember that you are doing this from a place of no identity, from a place of no agenda, from a place of no ego. God is the one that is ultimately helping all of us awaken. It is God that will determine when is the right time for something to flourish, if at all it is meant to flourish, right? We all have the potential, but unfortunately not all of us actually fulfill that potential. So it only gets more challenging the further you go on this journey. And I know probably that's not what many of you want to hear. We obviously are always talking about the peace and the joy and the bliss and the nirvana of awakening, but these are some of the elements that are just reality. We're going to have to face this. But of course, with greater challenges comes greater power, comes greater understanding, comes greater wisdom. So even though we have more challenges to deal with, at least we'll now have an understanding to be able to manage those challenges, right? If you don't have the understanding that, like someone who is unawakened or unconscious, well, then you don't know, right? You don't know the right path. So just being on the wrong path, you feel like this is normal, this is life. But when you start going on the right path, when you start to take the steps toward enlightenment, then you'll know the right path. And even if you encounter many people on the road that seemingly are not on that path, you will know in that moment how to address it. So I thank you all for taking some time to watch this video. I know it's a topic that a lot of you have been kind of talking about and just kind of naturally bringing up. I hope this video kind of answered indirectly maybe some of the questions that you might have, maybe some of the experiences that you're going through right now. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your support. Would definitely love if you could drop a like if you're still watching the video. And also, check out some of the other videos as well. Let me know how I'm doing. If there's any other content that you'd like to see or any other topics, I'm always, open to suggestions and feedback and anything else that can help you all and help me, of course, as we continue to grow and see, this channel hopefully, helping more people and becoming something of service for the community at large. But I'll leave you at that. I promise I won't talk anymore, and I look forward to seeing you next time.